I want to go to Vegas with my friends. The words hung in the air, and Chloe herself was surprised by their sharpness. They seemed to cut through the sizzle of oil in the pan and the quiet murmur of the TV in the living room. Frank, who was standing at the stove with his back to her, froze. His hand, holding a spatula, stopped mid-air. For a moment, the only sound in their house was the ticking of the wall clock. Chloe tensed, waiting for a question, a reprimand, anything. Then, Frank slowly turned around. There was not a hint of irritation on his face. He looked her over, and the corners of his eyes crinkled with amusement. And then he laughed. It was not a quiet chuckle, but a loud, genuine laugh that instantly shattered all the tension. "Whoa," he said, setting the spatula down. "That sounds like an ultimatum. Are your bags already packed?" Chloe could not help but smile, feeling the anxiety begin to fade. "Not yet, but almost. It's Sarah's bachelorette party. For a weekend, 2 weeks from now. A bachelorette party in Vegas." Frank shook his head as he walked toward her. "That Sarah of yours really knows how to throw a party. So why did you say it like you were declaring war?" "I do not know," she admitted honestly. "It's just Vegas. I thought you might be worried." He stood behind her chair and placed his hands on her shoulders, giving them a light squeeze. His touch was familiar and calming. "Worried? Chloe, I cannot be happier for you. You worked so hard. If anyone deserves a couple of days of recklessness in Sin City, it's you." He leaned in, and she felt his warm breath near her ear. "Of course you should go, and you need to let loose. I am serious. Do not think about a thing, and just have fun." "Thank you, Frank," she whispered, covering his hand with hers. "Just one condition," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "You have to put $100 on black for me. You got a good feeling about it." She laughed. "It's a deal." In that moment, in their quiet home filled with the smell of dinner, their future felt unshakable, and his trust in her, absolute. The deafening jackpot bells of a nearby slot machine made Chloe jump. They were walking through the enormous lobby of Caesar's Palace, and it felt less like a hotel and more like a separate city that never slept beneath an artificial sky. The marble floor reflected the light of 1,000 lamps and the golden wall decor. The air was cold and smelled of something sweet and artificial. In their room on the 23rd floor, a cork popped. The champagne cork hit the ceiling, and the friends filled their glasses with laughter. Chloe walked to the panoramic window. Below them, Las Vegas stretched out, an ocean of colorful lights that promised everything all at once. She took a sip. The icy bubbles felt good going down. Up here, her ordinary, proper life felt like a dream. The city was the reality. An hour later, wearing her best cocktail dress, she walked into the club. She could feel the heavy, pulsing beat in her chest. In the semi-darkness, pierced by blue and red strobing lights, a dense mass of people was moving. Chloe squeezed her way to the bar, ordered something strong and cold, and took a long drink to build up her courage. Then she stepped into the crowd. She danced with her eyes closed, giving herself over to the music, letting it guide her body. She did not notice a group of guys had joined the space near them, until one of them was suddenly right in front of her as the crowd swayed. He was tall, and his shoulders seemed incredibly broad. He smiled, and that smile was the only calm spot in the surrounding chaos. "Hey, I am Jake," he yelled, leaning in close to her. "Chloe," she yelled back. A real conversation was nearly impossible. They exchanged fragments. He was from California, a firefighter, here for a friend's birthday. Every word was swallowed by the roaring music, but words were not really necessary. He took her hand, and she let him lead her to the center of the dance floor. He moved with the confidence of a man who was perfectly aware of his own power. He led, she followed. An unspoken attraction sparked between them, born from the rhythm, the glances, and the accidental touches in the crowd. She lost all track of time. When her friends came up to her to say they were leaving to play at the casino, Chloe was surprised to realize several hours had passed. "You coming with us, Chloe?" Sarah asked. Chloe looked at the tired but happy faces of her friends. Then she looked at Jake. He stood there silently, not pressuring her, but his whole posture was one of anticipation. He did not take his eyes off her. Leaving now would be the logical thing to do. The safe thing. Back to her group, to familiar faces. But she did not want to be safe. "You guys go on," she told Sarah. "I am going to dance a little longer." Her friends melted into the crowd. Chloe stayed. She turned back to Jake, and he smiled as if he knew exactly what she would choose. She smiled back. The night was no longer just fun. Now it held a promise. The music was still pounding, but for Chloe, it had faded into the background, becoming a dull roar. All of her focus was on the man in front of her, on Jake. His smile was a promise of something more than just dancing. When he leaned in so close his lips nearly brushed her ear, she felt a shiver run down her spine. "It's too loud in here," he yelled, his voice a low, pleasant rumble. "Want to find somewhere we can actually talk?" Chloe did not hesitate for a second. She just nodded. It was not a decision made with her mind. It was an instinct she had decided to stop fighting. He took her hand. His palm was large and warm, and the simple gesture felt incredibly intimate in the middle of the roaring crowd. He led her confidently through the dance floor, easily navigating between people, his hand on her back acting as a firm, guiding shield. They left the club and stepped back into the endless, brightly lit world of the casino. The noise out here was different. Not a deafening beat, but a chaotic symphony of chiming coins, electronic trills from the slot machines, and the hum of hundreds of voices. The people at the poker and blackjack tables sat with stone-faced concentration, completely absorbed in their games. For them, nothing existed beyond the cards and the chips. Chloe felt the same way, as if she had fallen out of reality, existing only in this moment, being led by a stranger through a gilded labyrinth. Jake led her to a small, dimly lit lounge bar in a far wing of the hotel. Quiet jazz was playing, and the air smelled of expensive whiskey. They sat in deep leather armchairs at a table in the corner. Finally, they could speak without shouting. "So, Chloe," he began, after the waiter brought their drinks. "Tell me, what does a girl like you do when she is not conquering the dance floors of Vegas?" "I'm a school teacher," she replied, and, as she said it out loud, she was struck by the absurdity of the situation. Jake laughed, taking a sip from his glass. "A teacher? I never would have guessed. My teachers definitely did not dance like that." "Maybe they just did not have the right partner," Chloe replied flirtatiously, surprised by her own boldness. The alcohol and the atmosphere were doing their work, liberating a part of her that had been dormant for so long under the weight of responsibility. They talked for about an hour. The conversation was light, superficial. They did not dive into the details of their lives. He did not ask if she had someone, and she did not ask about his past. They were two anonymous figures in an anonymous city, and there was a certain charm to that. He told funny stories about his job. She told stories about the funny things her students did. The important thing was not in the words, but in what was happening between them, in the glances that lingered a little too long, in the way he would accidentally brush her hand when reaching for his glass, in the tension that built with every passing minute. When their glasses were empty, a pause hung in the air. The evening had reached a natural crossroads. They could either part ways, or they could take the next step. "I do not want this night to end," Jake said quietly, breaking the silence. And that was all it took. They rode the elevator to his floor in complete silence. The walls were mirrored, and Chloe could see their reflection. Jake's tall, confident figure, and herself with flushed cheeks and sparkling eyes. She did not recognize that woman. When the elevator gave a soft lurch and the door slid open, he pressed her against the wall and kissed her. The kiss was demanding and hungry, and she answered him with the same passion, reaching the point of no return. His room was as impersonal as their conversation had been. Standard hotel luxury, a huge bed, and a panoramic window that reflected the Vegas night. Chloe pushed away thoughts of Frank, repeating a mantra she'd heard a dozen times. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. This was not a betrayal. It was a dream, an exception to the rules, a single night outside of time and space. Later, tangled in the sheets, they were laughing, drunk on champagne from the minibar and on each other. Chloe's phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Sarah. "You alive over there? Winky face. Hope our teacher is having fun." Chloe giggled and showed the message to Jake. "Teacher," he smirked, pulling her closer. "Tell them the teacher caught a real California firefighter and is about to give him a grade on his performance." His bravado was contagious. In that cocoon of alcohol and adrenaline, a wild, reckless idea was born. "You know what? Let us show them what a real prize looks like," Chloe said, her eyes glinting with mischief. "I am guessing a guy your size is a pretty rare specimen." "What right now?" Jake played along. "Why not? What happened next was like a scene from a movie." Jake, full of smugness and playful arrogance, stood in the middle of the room and struck a frank, boastful pose. Chloe, choking back laughter, grabbed her phone and aimed the camera at him. The click of the shutter sounded deafeningly loud in the quiet room. A photo appeared on the screen, a vulgar, compromising trophy of their shared game. In that moment, it seemed incredibly funny and daring. It was their secret, their joke, the physical proof of her rebellion. The laughter died in her throat when the first pale rays of morning sun broke through a gap in the thick curtains. The magic of the night had vanished without a trace. The room was filled with a cold, unforgiving light that exposed all the mess. The empty bottle, the clothes scattered on the floor, two strangers in the same bed. Jake was asleep, his face relaxed and unfamiliar. An icy wave of panic washed over Chloe. The "It's Vegas" mantra no longer worked. She looked at the sleeping man, and all she felt was a burning shame. She had to run. She tiptoed out of bed, quickly gathering her clothes. Before she left, she picked up her phone. She opened the gallery. The picture that had seemed so funny last night now looked disgusting and cheap. Her finger hovered over the trash icon. She hit delete, and the photo vanished. The relief was short-lived, but it gave her the strength to take the next step. She slipped out of the room, quietly closing the door behind her, and practically ran down the empty hallway to the elevator. The door closed behind Chloe, shutting out the noise of the airport. The silence of their home hit her with an almost physical force. Everything was exactly as she had left it. The stack of mail on the entryway table, the familiar smell of coffee beans and clean laundry, a pair of Frank's work boots left carelessly by the door. Everything was normal, and that normality made her stomach twist into a knot. Frank walked out of the living room, a wide, happy smile spreading across his face. "You back. I was starting to miss you." He stepped toward her and wrapped her in a hug. Chloe clung to him with a strength that surprised even herself. She buried her face in his shoulder, breathing in his scent. The scent of home, of safety, of the life she had just gambled away for a few hours of recklessness. Her hug was too long, too desperate. It was not just a welcome home gesture. It was a silent plea for forgiveness. Frank did not seem to notice. He just held her tighter in return. "You must be tired. So, tell me, how was it?" He pulled back, looking in her eyes, and Chloe felt the first jolt of panic. She looked away. Everything was great. It was awesome, she tried to smile. Vegas is Vegas. Lots of lights, lots of noise. I am glad to be home. She quickly walked into the kitchen, creating distance. Her answers to his next questions were just as brief and vague. Yes, Sarah was happy. Yes, the hotel was beautiful. No, she did not win much. She felt like a spy being interrogated, afraid that any extra detail might give her away. To stop the questions, she started asking him about his weekend, about work, about the neighbors. She created a verbal smokescreen, and Frank, simple and trusting, easily got lost in it. For the next few days, Chloe lived on high alert. Her guilt was like a pendulum, swinging her from one extreme to the other. On Monday evening, she cooked a complex, three-course meal they usually only had on holidays. She put on a nice dress and lit candles. All evening, she hovered around Frank, constantly touching him, laughing with exaggerated delight at every one of his jokes. She played the part of the perfect, loving wife so desperately that Frank eventually asked in surprise, "Is it some anniversary I forgot about?" She gave a theatrical laugh and said she just missed him. But the next day, everything changed. As Frank was getting ready for work, he tossed a joke over his shoulder. "Try not to lose my whole paycheck playing online poker today. Gambler." It was their old joke, but the word lose hit a nerve. What is that supposed to mean? She snapped back. Her voice was cold and hostile. Frank froze with his keys in his hand. "I was just joking, Chloe. Like always." "Well, it was not funny," she clipped, turning back to the sink. He walked over and gently touched her shoulder. "Hey, is everything okay?" She immediately felt a wave of regret and shame for her reaction. "Yeah, I'm sorry. I did not sleep well. Work has been a nightmare." She forced herself to turn around and squeeze out a smile. But Frank was no longer looking at her with carefree affection, but with a faint hint of bewilderment. He could feel that something was wrong, but he could not understand what. It was like he was walking on a minefield, where any careless step could trigger an inexplicable reaction. Things came to a head on Thursday night. They were sitting on the couch, watching some show. For the first time in days, Chloe had almost relaxed. Frank, as usual, was scrolling through his phone. Suddenly, he let out a quiet chuckle. "Well, look at this," he said with a smirk. "Look who we have here, the star of the dance floor." He held the phone out to her. Chloe's blood ran cold. She forced herself to look at the screen. It was a short, edited video, filmed by some blogger or just a random person in a Vegas club. A dynamic montage of clips set to loud music. And among the dozens of faces, for 2 seconds, the camera caught her. She was dancing with Jake. Very close. She was laughing with her head thrown back, and his hand was resting on her waist. An icy horror seized her lungs. The world narrowed to that small, glowing screen. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind. He knows. It's over. Where did this video come from? That is you, right? Frank was looking at her with amused curiosity. Looks like the party was a success. Who asked the guy? One of the groom's friends? His voice was completely calm, even playful. He did not suspect a thing. That realization gave her strength. Chloe forced herself to laugh. The sound was a little nervous, but convincing enough. "Oh my God, how embarrassing," she said, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Yeah, that's me. I have no idea who that is." It was such a wild crowd. Everyone was just all mixed together. We were dancing with everybody. She waved a hand dismissively. "I guess I was drunker than I thought. So cringe." She played her part perfectly. Her explanation was logical and simple. For Vegas, it was more than plausible. Frank laughed along with her. "Come on, it's not a big deal. At least you have something to remember." He took his phone back and continued scrolling. The danger had passed. Chloe felt the tension slowly release its grip on her muscles. But when she glanced at Frank, she noticed he was not smiling anymore. He was staring at the dark television screen, but his thoughts were clearly elsewhere. He did not say anything, but Chloe saw it in his eyes. He had believed her, but not completely. Her strange behavior over the past few days, her irritability, and her over-the-top affection, and now this video. The pieces did not fit together into a clear picture, but they created a subtle disharmony. It was not a crack in their trust just yet, but it was a thin, almost invisible scratch on a perfectly smooth surface. And Chloe knew that scratches like that have a way of growing. The Saturday was perfect for a barbecue. The sun was high in the pale autumn sky, its warmth no longer scorching but pleasant. In Frank and Chloe's backyard, their usual group of friends had gathered. The air was filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the appetizing smell of smoke from the grill, where Frank, in his favorite King of the Grill apron, was flipping sizzling burger patties. 2 weeks had passed since the evening he'd seen that strange video. In that time, Chloe's behavior had leveled out. She had become calmer, returning to her usual role as a caring and attentive wife. Frank had almost convinced himself that her previous nervousness and the video were exactly what they seemed, the aftereffects of a wild but innocent trip. He looked at her now. She was laughing, telling some story to her friends, her face relaxed and happy, and he felt the last remnants of his unease dissolve into the day's idyllic atmosphere. Everything was okay. They were okay. "Hey, Frank, do not burn the burgers," his friend Dave yelled from the other end of the yard. Frank smiled and raised his tongs to signal that everything was under control. He felt completely happy. It was in that exact moment, when his guard was completely down, that the fateful words were spoken. The conversation among the group of women, where Chloe was standing, had turned to travel. "Speaking of trips," said Emily, one of Chloe's friends from the Bachelorette party, her voice loud and cheerful. "We never got to hear all the details about Vegas. Chloe barely told us a thing." Frank, taking the cooked patties off the grill, was only half listening. "Oh, there's not much to tell," Chloe said with a wave of her hand. "We went to some casinos, we danced, we drank way too much champagne. A typical Bachelorette party." "Hardly typical," Emily pressed on, clearly enjoying her role as the one with the inside scoop. "You did not tell Frank the best part. About that group of firefighters from California we met at the club. God, those guys were something else. Total hunks, like right off a magazine cover." Frank froze, the plate still in his hands. The word firefighters hit him like an electric shock. It was specific. It was real. And it instantly, with 100% certainty, connected in his mind to that 2-second video. The blurry figure of a stranger holding his wife on the dance floor now had a profession. The sounds of the party disappeared for Frank. He no longer heard his friends' laughter or the music from the speaker. There was just a low ringing in his ears. He slowly raised his eyes and looked at his wife. And he saw it. It lasted no longer than a heartbeat, but it was enough. Before Chloe could force a carefree smile onto her face, a wave of pure, genuine panic flashed across it. For a split second, her eyes widened in terror, her pupils constricting. It was the face of someone whose darkest secret had just been dragged into the light. "Emily, you re-exaggerating as usual." Chloe's voice was a little higher than normal. She gave a nervous laugh. "We just chatted with some guys for a couple of minutes. It was nothing." Emily, oblivious to the tension, continued. "A couple of minutes? That one guy, Jake, would not leave your side all night. A name. Now he had a name, too. Jake, a firefighter." Someone clapped Frank on the shoulder. "Hey, earth to Frank. The burgers are getting cold." Frank flinched as if waking up. He forced a smile and put the plate on the table. "Yeah, of course. Dig in." The rest of the day became a form of torture for him. He moved and spoke on autopilot, but his mind was racing. He had become an observer at his own party. He watched Chloe. Now that he knew what to look for, he saw everything. He saw how she avoided his gaze. He saw how her laughter was a little too loud, a little too brittle. He saw how she bustled around the guests. Anything to keep from being idle, from being quiet, from being alone with the silence. She was trapped, and she knew it. When the last guest had left and the click of the front door lock echoed through the house, the silence was deafening. "That was a great night," Chloe said, not looking at him. She began gathering empty bottles and dirty plates with an exaggerated diligence. Any action to avoid meeting his eyes. Frank helped her in silence. Every movement was mechanical. In his head, events were replaying on a loop. Chloe's strange behavior after she got back. The video. The word firefighters. The name Jake. And, most importantly, the look on her face. The look of a trapped animal. All the pieces of the puzzle were fitting together into one ugly, disgusting picture. It was no longer a vague uneasiness. It was a fully formed, heavy suspicion that weighed on his heart like a stone. Later, after the house was clean and Chloe had gone to bed, claiming she was exhausted, Frank remained sitting in the dark living room. He stared out the window at his quiet, perfect yard, but all he could see was his wife's face, distorted by panic. He ran through the options in his head. He could storm into the bedroom and demand an answer, but she would deny everything. She would call him a crazy, jealous husband, blame Emily's drunken rambling. He had nothing but his deductions, and what he needed was the truth, the undeniable truth. He sat there in the darkness, desperation mixing with a cold resolve. He had to find out. But how? How could he verify something that happened thousands of miles away, in a city built on secrets? How could he find the proof that would either destroy his life or restore his peace of mind. The question hung in the silence of the empty house, and there was no answer. The night brought Frank no peace. He lay in bed next to Chloe, staring at the ceiling, feeling like a stranger in his own home. Her steady, calm breathing felt like a mockery. How could she sleep so peacefully when his world was coming apart at the seams? Every word spoken at the party echoed in his mind. Firefighters, hunks, Jake would not leave her side all night. The words had transformed from drunken chatter into hard facts. He could no longer stand the toxic mixture of doubt and fear. The not knowing was worse than any truth, no matter how ugly. Carefully, so as not to wake Chloe, he slipped out of bed. His bare feet were silent on the cool hardwood floor. He went downstairs to the living room, which was submerged in a thick, nighttime darkness. The only source of light was the small red standby light on the television. Frank walked to the shelf, where they usually left their gadgets to charge. The family tablet was lying there. He sat down in an armchair, placing the tablet on his lap. He hesitated for a moment. This was the point of no return. Once he crossed this line, he could never go back to his old life, to blissful ignorance. He was betraying her trust by invading her private space. But had not her secrets already invaded his? He pressed the home button. The screen came to life, and he opened the Photos app. His heart was pounding in his throat. He found the album titled Vegas that Chloe had created. With a bated breath, Frank opened it, and he exhaled. Dozens of photos, and all of them were completely innocent. There was Chloe and her friends with giant cocktails. There they were, posing in front of the Bellagio fountains. Selfies from the hotel room, where they were making funny faces at the camera. Group shots at a restaurant. Every photo was filled with laughter, fun, and nothing suspicious. Not a single unfamiliar man. Not a single Jake. For a second, a wave of shame mixed with immense relief washed over Frank. He was a crazy, jealous idiot. He had worked himself into a paranoid state over one careless phrase. Chloe was right. Emily had exaggerated everything. He was ready to turn off the tablet and go back to sleep, praying his wife would never find out about his moment of weakness. Frank had almost pressed the lock button when his gaze caught on the menu on the left. He swiped his finger down, scrolling past the albums, favorites, selfies, screenshots, and at the very bottom, under the heading Other, was a line that made his breath catch in his throat, recently deleted. His finger hovered over the screen. He knew he should not. He knew that if there was nothing there, he would forever see himself as a pathetic paranoiac. But if there was something, he tapped it. The folder opened. At first, it was just junk. A few failed, blurry shots of the fountain. 5 nearly identical selfies, from which Chloe had obviously chosen the best one for the album. Frank kept scrolling, his hope that he was wrong growing with every swipe of his finger. And then he saw the first photo. It was taken in a cramped, dimly lit space. Reflections glinted off the mirrored wall of an elevator. In the picture was Chloe, and a stranger with a strong jaw and a smug smirk. Frank recognized him. It was the same face from the blurry video. Jake. He was kissing his wife. Not tenderly, but greedily, masterfully, and Chloe was answering him with the same fierce passion. The air left Frank's lungs. The world narrowed to that single image. But that was only the beginning. He forced himself to scroll further. The next photo. The same hotel room that was in the background of one of Jake's pictures. They were in white bathrobes. Chloe was sitting on his lap, her head resting on his chest. She was looking up at him with adoration, and he was holding the phone, taking a selfie, looking directly into the camera with the air of conqueror. This picture was worse than the kiss. It spoke of intimacy, of comfort, of time spent together after. Frank felt a wave of nausea. He thought it could not get any worse. He was wrong. The last picture had been taken by Chloe. It was only of Jake. He was completely naked. He was standing in the middle of the room, staring directly into the lens with an arrogant, boastful smirk. He was posing. He was putting himself and his manhood on display, like a trophy. And Frank understood with horrifying clarity that his wife had been standing opposite him, holding the phone, and possibly laughing. This was not just a picture of a lover. It was an act of humiliation, a demonstration of complete and utter contempt for him, for their marriage, for everything they had. The woman who took this picture was a total stranger to him. Frank sat frozen in the darkness. The tablet screen went dark, but the ugly image was burned into his retinas. The silence in the house was no longer peaceful. The truth he had so desperately searched for had finally found him, and it was unbearably bitter. Frank walked slowly up the stairs. Then he shoved the bedroom door open. In the faint light coming from the street, he could see Chloe sleeping peacefully, her hair fanned out across the pillow. She looked so innocent, and that innocence was the most disgusting lie of all. Frank did not start yelling. He just walked to the bed and switched on the bedside lamp. The harsh light flooded the room, and Chloe squinted in annoyance, muttering something in her sleep. She slowly opened her eyes, trying to focus. "Frank? What time is it? What's wrong?" His face was a stone mask. He did not answer. Silently, he held out the tablet to her. The screen was unlocked, displaying that last, most humiliating photograph. She took the tablet, her face still sleepy and confused. She stared at the screen for a second, and then Frank watched as drowsiness was replaced by recognition, and then by absolute, animalistic horror. The color drained from her face. "Frank," she whispered. Her voice trembled. I do not think that's mine." His silence was scarier than any scream. "What is this? What is going on?" She tossed the tablet onto the comforter as if it had burned her hands. She sat up in bed, clutching the sheet to her chest. "It was just a stupid joke. We were drunk. We were. A joke." His voice came for the first time, low and devoid of all emotion. "Was it funny to you, Chloe?" "No. I mean, yes, but it did not mean anything." "Frank, please, just listen to me." Tears welled up at her voice. "It was just one night. One stupid, drunken mistake." "A mistake." He took a step toward the bed. "People make mistakes. They do not pose for photos. Mistakes do not smirk for the camera while you retaking their picture to show off to your friends later. I was not going to show it off. I deleted it." She yelled, scrambling out of bed. "You deleted it to hide the evidence." His voice cracked into a shout, the cold fury finally breaking through. "You thought I would not find out. You came home, you hugged me, you slept in my bed, all while knowing you had this on your phone. How could you?" "I do not know," she sobbed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I was not myself. It was Vegas. It was like a dream. It was not me." "Not you," he laughed bitterly. "Then who was it? Who kissed him in the elevator? Who slept with him? Who the hell was standing there taking his picture? Chloe? Who was it?" He grabbed the tablet and jabbed his finger at the screen. "Was this not you?" Chloe flinched back as if he had struck her. Her defensive wall of excuses crumbled. She sank to the floor, shaking with sobs. "I'm sorry. Frank, I am so sorry. Please, I love you. It was the biggest mistake of my life. Please, do not leave me. We can fix this. I'll do anything." She crawled toward him, trying to grab his legs, but he stepped back from her, as if from something unclean. Frank looked down at her, and the screaming inside him went quiet, replaced by an icy devastation. He looked at the woman he had loved more than anything in the world and felt nothing but disgust. Her tears, her pleas, it was all fake now. Trust was not just broken. It had been incinerated, the ashes scattered on the wind that night in Vegas. There was no fixing it. UCA not glued back together what has been turned to dust. He was silent for a long time, letting her cry it out. Where her sobs quieted into small, ragged gasps, he delivered his verdict. His voice was calm and final, and its calmness sent a chill down Chloe's spine. "Get up, Chloe." She slowly rose, looking at him with one last, desperate hope. "Pack your things." The hope in her eyes died. "Frank, no. Please. I want you to leave," he said, articulating every word. "Right now, just take what you need. You can send someone for the rest later." "Where will I go?" she whispered. "I do not care." He turned to leave. He could not stand to be in the same room with her any longer. He was already at the door when she yelled at his back. UCA not just destroy our life like this. Frank stopped in the doorway, but did not turn around. I did not destroy anything, Chloe, he said into the empty hallway. You did all of this yourself. He walked out of the room and closed the door behind him. The click of the lock sounded like a crack of thunder. The story of their love was over. 5 months later, the air in the law firm's conference room was stale and smelled of furniture polish. For people sat at the long, polished mahogany table, but the room felt empty. Frank and Chloe sat opposite each other, separated by a stretch of table that felt like a chasm. Flanking them were their lawyers, shuffling through papers with practiced efficiency. Frank did not look at Chloe, but he felt her presence. He stared at his own hands, which rested on the table. They looked like they belonged to someone else. In 6 months, he had lost weight. Dark circles had settled under his eyes, and gray had appeared in the hair at his temples. He felt older not by 6 months, but by a lifetime. Chloe had changed, too. When he glanced at her at the beginning of the meeting, he had seen a drawn, pale face and empty eyes. The vibrant, laughing woman he had once loved and the reckless rebel from the Vegas photos, both were gone. In their place sat a quiet, exhausted stranger. So, all major points of the asset division agreement have been settled. Frank's lawyer, a tall man in a severe suit, said in a monotone. He was addressing Chloe's lawyer, ignoring the clients themselves, as if they were not participants but subjects of a transaction. The house is to be sold, proceeds divided 50-50. Retirement accounts and investments remain with their respective owners. My client is in agreement. The female lawyer opposite him nodded. Frank heard the words, but did not absorb their meaning. The house is to be sold. Their house. The place where they had made plans, laughed, argued, and made up. Now was just an asset to be liquidated. Their entire past had been reduced to a stack of papers and legal terms. Then, I believe we can proceed with signing the final documents, his lawyer concluded. He pushed a thick stack of papers toward Frank and placed a heavy pen beside it. Just sign on the indicated lines, Frank. Frank picked up the pen. It was cold and heavy. He looked at the last page. The official, soulless text stated that the marriage between Frank Miller and Chloe Miller was dissolved. He exhaled. He made the first signature. The scratching of the pen on the expensive paper was the only sound in the room. Page by page, he mechanically signed his name, legally erasing years of his life. When he was finished, Chloe's lawyer pushed a similar stack to her. Frank watched as her trembling hand traced her signature on the same lines. Excellent, his lawyer said, gathering the papers. I'll make copies for everyone. This will just take a couple of minutes. Both lawyers stood and left the room, leaving Frank and Chloe alone together for the first and last time. The silence that fell was deafening. Frank had no intention of breaking it. He just wanted it to be over. Frank. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. He forced himself to look up at her. Well, will you ever be able to forgive me? She asked. There were no tears in her eyes, only a bottomless exhaustion and pain. Frank looked at her for a long time, at the woman who had been his world. The anger was gone. The pain had dulled. All that was left was emptiness and a bitter clarity. Forgive you, he said the word slowly, weighing it. Maybe. Someday. I do not know, Chloe. He paused, searching for the most precise, most honest words. But forgiveness would not change anything, because I will never be able to forget. That photo, the way you were laughing. I can never forget that, and I will never be able to trust you again. He looked directly into her eyes, and she saw the final verdict in them. And without trust, he finished, nothing else matters. At that moment, the lawyers returned to the room with folders in their hands. The moment was over. The conversation was finished. They silently accepted their copies of the documents. Frank stood up first. He did not say goodbye. He did not look in her direction. He just gave a curt nod to his lawyer, turned, and walked to the door. Chloe remained seated, watching his back. She watched him open the door and walk into the hallway without a backward glance. Frank stepped out of the glass doors of the office building onto a sunlit street. The noise of the city, the honking of cars and the voices of passers-by, washed over him. He squinted for a moment in the bright light. Then he took a deep breath of cool air, squared his shoulders, and started walking down the sidewalk, disappearing into the anonymous crowd. His marriage was over. His past was left behind upstairs, in a sterile room, in the form of signatures on paper. Ahead of him was the unknown. He was alone. And for the first time in a long time, he felt that maybe that was enough. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, do not forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.